Canine German Shepherd refuses to let newborn sleep alone. When the parents find out why, Number 1. They call the police. He wouldn't leave the baby's side. Every night, the retired Canine German Shepherd stood guard beside the crib, ears alert, eyes focused, body tense. At first, the parents thought it was cute. Then it became strange. He barked at the nursery door. He growled when they tried to move him. And on the third night, what he did made them grab the phone and call the police in sheer panic. What this loyal dog sensed will leave you speechless. And what the officers discovered afterward changed everything. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. Because sometimes the ones who can't speak are the ones who save us. Emily Sullivan stood quietly in the nursery doorway, watching her newborn son sleep. The room was warm and softly lit by the glowing night lamp shaped like a moon. Little Noah, just 8 days old, lay peacefully in his crib, swaddled tightly, his tiny chest rising and falling with gentle rhythm. Emily's heart swelled with love, exhaustion, and the 1,000 small fears that came with being a new mother. But something else caught her attention. Lying right next to the crib, with his chin resting on his front paws and his golden brown eyes locked on the baby, was Max. Their 8-year-old retired German Shepherd Canine. He hadn't moved in hours. "Come on, Max," she whispered, walking into the room. "Go rest, boy. You need sleep too." Max didn't even blink. Josh, her husband, stood behind her in the hallway, scratching his head, still in his t-shirt and sweatpants. "Is he still there?" he asked. Emily nodded. "He hasn't left the baby's side since yesterday morning." Not once. Josh stepped into the room and crouched down beside Max. "Come on, buddy. Let the baby sleep. You've done your shift." Max didn't budge. Instead, his ears twitched, and he let out a soft, low growl. Not at them, but toward the crib. Josh looked up at Emily. "Okay, that's weird." Max had always been loyal. They had adopted him from the K9 unit 3 years ago, when he retired after years of police work. Search and rescue, protection, threat detection. He'd saved lives, tracked missing kids, disarmed suspects, and even after leaving the force, he had always been calm, predictable, gentle with kids. But now, something had changed. "Maybe he's just being protective," Emily said. "It's his instinct." Josh shrugged. "Maybe. Still, it's kind of intense." That night, they tried closing the nursery door to let Noah sleep without disruption. Max didn't take it well. He sat outside the door and scratched. When that didn't work, he barked, loud enough to wake the baby, and half the neighborhood. Emily opened the door again, flustered. "Max, please, what's going on with you?" Max pushed past her, trotted to the crib, sat down, and resumed his silent guard. And when Emily tried to lead him away, he growled again, not aggressive, just firm. He was trying to say something. The following morning, after a sleepless night, Emily fed Noah and placed him back in the crib. She turned to grab her coffee, and by the time she turned around, Max was already lying next to the crib again, tail still, breathing shallow. That's when she noticed it. Max wasn't just watching, he was listening. Head tilted slightly, eyes scanning the baby's chest like he was counting each breath. And then, as Noah fell asleep, Max stood up, stiff, and pressed his nose against the bars of the crib. He let out one bark. Just one. Emily froze, her cup still in her hand. Then, Max barked again, louder this time, and began pawing the side of the crib, whining low and sharp. Emily rushed forward. "Noah?" The baby wasn't moving. His face looked pale, his lips slightly tinted with a bluish hue. Heart pounding, Emily scooped him up and screamed, "Josh!" Josh came running in, eyes wide. "What's wrong?" "Noah, he's not breathing." Josh grabbed the phone. Emily shook Noah gently, panicked, sobbing. And then, a sharp inhale, a tiny gasp. Noah coughed, then began to cry. Emily fell to her knees, holding her baby close, tears spilling down her face. Max stood beside her, whining softly, his head pressed into her arm. "He saved him," she whispered, her voice breaking. He saved our baby." Josh dropped the phone, stunned. They called the doctor, then the pediatrician. Then, when the tests came back clean and nothing seemed out of place, they called the police. Not to report a crime, but to report a miracle. When Emily told the officer what Max had done, there was a long silence on the line. And then the officer said, "Ma'am, we need to come see him ourselves." By noon, the police were at the front door. Emily held Noah tightly in her arms, his tiny breaths now steady but shallow. Josh stood beside her, pacing. Max sat silently at their feet, staring toward the nursery, like he was still on duty. There was a knock. 2 officers stepped into the house. The older one, Sergeant Michaels, had a kind but weathered face. The younger, Officer Reyes, was in his 20s, eyes curious but respectful. They had both served with Max in the past. Michaels had been his handler. "It's been a while," Michaels said, kneeling in front of Max. "Hey, buddy." Max's tail thumped once, but his body stayed rigid. He wasn't in the mood for reunions. "We didn't know who else to call," Emily said. "It just didn't feel normal." He knew the baby had stopped breathing. Before we did. Michaels looked up, his expression serious. Max wasn't trained for infant care, but his scent training, it's exceptional. He can smell what humans can't. Even medical shifts. Josh spoke next, voice shaky. "We had the pediatrician come. She said Noah's fine. His vitals are normal. No signs of trauma, illness, nothing." Michael stood up. "And yet Max is still guarding him." Reyes glanced toward the nursery. "Can we take a look?" Emily nodded. They stepped into the room. The officers scanned the space. Nothing suspicious. A clean, cozy nursery. Bookshelf, changing table, stuffed animals, soft blue walls with cloud decals. But Max didn't follow them in. He stood at the threshold, growling low again. Michaels watched him carefully. "That's not fear. That's warning." "Warning of what?" Josh asked, tension in his voice. "There's nothing in there. No gas leak, no mold. We had everything checked before Noah was born." Reyes leaned over the crib. "You said he barks mostly at the crib, right?" Emily nodded. Reyes looked under it, around it. He tapped gently on the wooden frame, then paused. "What's this?" From beneath the crib, he pulled out a baby monitor, the secondary one they had set up during their first night home, the one Emily had forgotten about. It had fallen down behind the crib, wires tangled, blinking red. "That's odd," Reyes muttered. Michaels walked over. "We used this model in some of our surveillance tech. It emits a low frequency when recording, not harmful to humans. But a dog's hearing?" He looked at Wonks, who growled again, ears flattened. "That explains the agitation," Reyes said, "but not the baby's breathing episode." Emily sat down, rocking Noah gently. "He's had tiny moments like that since we brought him home. Just quick pauses in breathing. We thought it was newborn stuff." "It might be," Michaels said gently. "But Max doesn't react to small things, not unless he's sure it's dangerous." Josh frowned. "So you think there's more to this?" "I think Max doesn't trust this room," Michaels said. "Not just the monitor. Something else." As if on cue, Max got up, walked into the room for the first time, and went straight to the back wall. He sniffed, scratched once, then sat. Everyone turned. Michaels moved quickly. He ran his hand along the drywall. Knocked. Hollow. He pressed harder. The panel shifted. A hidden compartment. Reyes helped pull it open. Inside was a small cavity, lined with insulation, and buried deep inside, something metallic glinted in the light. A device. Small. Wired. Blinking red. Emily gasped. "What is that?" Reyes stepped back, voice tense. "That's not a baby monitor." Michaels leaned in. "That's a surveillance bug, audio transmitter, military grade." Josh stared, stunned. "You're telling me someone's been listening to us since we brought our baby home?" "Longer," Michaels said grimly. "That model has a battery life of months." Emily clutched Noah tighter, trembling. "Why? Who would do this?" Michaels didn't answer immediately. He turned to Max, who sat protectively beside the crib once again, watching the hidden wall. "He knew," Michaels whispered. "All this time, he wasn't protecting the baby from what was around him. He was protecting him from what was already here." The room fell silent. Outside, a siren wailed faintly in the distance. Inside, Max stood up and walked to the door, as if waiting for what was coming next. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed with Noah in the bassinet beside her, watching the baby's chest rise and fall with every breath. Josh had passed out on the couch after speaking to another set of officers, exhausted from trying to understand what had just happened in their home. But Max, he wasn't resting. He paced the hallway, slow and silent, like a soldier on patrol. Every so often, he'd poke his head into the bedroom, check on Noah, and then appear again into the shadows. Emily didn't stop him. After what he had done, what he had sensed, she trusted Max more than any human at that point. The hidden surveillance device was gone. The police had sealed the nursery. Officers were running diagnostics on the bug, trying to track its origin, but there were no immediate answers. Who had placed it there? When? And why? The official theory was that someone had been spying on the Sullivans, possibly for information, blackmail, or reasons unknown. But Max's behavior said it wasn't over. Emily got up quietly and walked into the kitchen, pouring a glass of water. Max was standing by the back door, motionless. His ears perked, his eyes fixed on something outside. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. He growled low, deep in his throat. Emily stepped closer. The backyard was dark, lit only by a single motion-activated floodlight. The trees swayed gently in the wind. Everything looked normal. Then the sensor light flickered. On. Off. On again. Max let out a short bark. Josh rushed in, half awake, eyes wide. "What's going on?" "Something's outside," Emily said. Josh grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch. Max immediately taking position beside him, muscles tight, ready. They scanned the yard. Nothing. Just quiet air and a swinging branch. But Max didn't move. His eyes were still locked on the far corner near the shed. Josh hesitated, then slowly moved toward it. Max barked sharply and lunged forward. Suddenly, from the side of the fence, a figure bolted, dressed in black, face covered. "Hey!" Josh shouted. The flashlight caught the man's back just as he jumped the fence and disappeared into the woods behind the property. Emily screamed from the doorway. "Was that—" "Yes," Josh yelled. "Someone was watching the house." Max didn't chase. Instead, he stood by the baby's window, growling up at the room. It was the same spot where the bug had been hidden, the same wall where he had first sounded the alarm. Emily's heart pounded. This wasn't random. Someone was targeting them. The next day, Detectives arrived with more advanced equipment. They swept the house for signals, devices, tampering, anything. They found 2 more bugs, one behind a living room outlet, another inside a smoke detector in the hallway. None of them would have been noticed without Max's earlier alert. Sergeant Michaels returned that afternoon, shaken. "This wasn't an accident," he said to Josh and Emily. "And it wasn't petty. These bugs were installed with precision." "Who would do something like this?" Emily asked. Michaels lowered his voice. "You mentioned something during your call that got passed to our cybercrime division. You said you had installed a smart camera system in the baby's room last month?" Josh nodded. "Yeah, just something simple. Wi-Fi monitor, motion sensor. Never got around to linking it to the cloud, though." Michaels glanced at his partner, then back at the couple. "We traced an intrusion attempt into that system. Someone tried to access it remotely from an IP address tied to a burner phone registered to a fake name." Emily felt her throat close. "So they were trying to watch the baby?" Josh stood up, fists clenched. "But why? What could they possibly want from us?" "We don't know yet," Michaels admitted. "But I can tell you this, your dog Max, he saved your son, and not just once." He looked down at the German shepherd sitting quietly at their feet, now calm again. "He's still alert, which tells me this isn't over." Emily picked up Noah, who stirred gently in her arms. Max stood and followed her, never more than a foot away. She turned to the officer. "What do we do now?" "You trust your instincts," Michaels said. "And more importantly, you trust his." As night fell again, Max resumed his place by the crib. But this time, Emily didn't try to move him, because now she was just as afraid as he was. Emily barely touched her coffee the next morning. Her hands trembled slightly as she watched Max sitting in front of the nursery door, motionless, alert, unwavering. Noah was peacefully asleep inside, his breathing normal, his tiny hand curled near his face. The room had been checked again. Every inch. No new bugs, no new signals. But Max hadn't let down his guard. Josh returned from the station with a manila envelope under his arm and a storm behind his eyes. "They pulled the IP logs from the smart monitor," he said, tossing the folder onto the kitchen table. Michaels and his team were right. The signal came from a burner, but that burner pinged from our neighborhood. Emily stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the signal came from 2 houses down, from Elliot's place." Elliot was Josh's longtime friend, a tech consultant who had helped install their nursery monitor and baby gear when Emily was still in the hospital. He had access. And now, everything pointed to him. Emily felt her blood run cold. "You think Elliot did this?" Josh didn't answer at first. He sank into the chair and buried his face in his hands. "I don't want to, but I can't ignore it. He knew our schedule. He helped install the system. He was even here alone, remember? The day we had to rush back to the hospital for the feeding specialist?" Emily's breath caught. That was 2 weeks ago. She hadn't thought twice at the time. "Did the police go talk to him?" she asked. Josh shook his head. "Not yet. They're waiting for a warrant." Max suddenly stood up, ears perked. He growled once and moved toward the window, standing tall. Emily followed his gaze. Someone was walking up the front path. It was Elliot. Josh stood instantly, moving to intercept. Emily grabbed Max's collar, but the dog growled louder, baring his teeth. Josh opened the door a crack. "Hey," he said, tight-lipped. Elliot smiled, too casually. "Hey, man, just wanted to check in on the little guy. I brought a small gift." Josh didn't move. "You didn't call first." Elliot shrugged, holding up a small blue gift bag. "Didn't think I needed to." Max growled so loud now that it made the hair on Emily's arms stand up. He was pressing hard against her, trying to get through the doorway. Elliot raised an eyebrow. "What's with him?" Josh didn't blink. You tell me. The smile faded just a bit. Is something wrong? Emily finally let go of Max. The dog darted forward and stood between Josh and Elliot, snarling, his body stiff, his eyes wild with warning. Elliot took a step back. What the hell is wrong with your dog? Max barked, sharp and vicious. Not out of fear, out of defense. Josh stepped between them. You need to leave, Elliot. Elliot's eyes narrowed. Are you serious right now? We know someone accessed the baby monitor. The signal came from this neighborhood. From your house? Elliot laughed. Too fast, too forced. That's ridiculous. We'll let the police figure that out, Josh said, his voice like ice. Max took one final step forward, and Elliot dropped the gift bag. Then ran. Josh shouted after him as Max barked furiously, pulling against the porch rail, but it was too late. Elliot was already halfway down the street, disappearing behind the corner. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, her hand clutched to her chest. It was him? All this time. It had been someone they trusted. That night, Michaels came back with 2 detectives. They dusted the dropped gift bag for prints. They searched the neighborhood. But Elliot had vanished. His apartment was locked, his phone off. His car still in the driveway, abandoned. But the damage was done. They found audio files later. Hours of recordings from inside the nursery. Noah crying. Emily singing. Josh talking about passwords, work, banking. Everything. They had been watched, studied, stalked. And Max? He had known from the start. Michael sat beside the dog that night, gently stroking his fur. I don't know how you knew, but you kept them safe. Max let out a soft huff and rested his head on Michael's knee, eyes never leaving the hallway where the baby slept. He's not done watching, Emily said from the doorway, holding Noah close. He'll never stop. Michaels nodded. No, he won't. Outside, the wind began to howl again. But inside that house, Max stood like stone. Because in his world, danger doesn't end when the door is locked. It ends when the ones he loves are safe, and not a second before. For the next 2 days, the Sullivan home became a fortress. Plainclothes officers were stationed across the street. Surveillance vans rotated shifts. The front door remained locked, the windows sealed, and Max, ever vigilant, never strayed more than 10 feet from Noah's crib. Emily barely slept. Josh barely ate. The fear no longer came from the unknown, but from knowing too much. Elliot was still missing, and every hour that passed without a trace made it worse. Then came the call. Sergeant Michaels returned just after noon with 2 agents from the Department of Homeland Security. They weren't in uniform, but their presence filled the living room like a thundercloud. We've uncovered something, one of them said, laying out a folder on the table. And it's not just about your baby. Emily leaned in slowly. Inside were photos, satellite images, bank transfers, encrypted chat logs. Josh scanned them, confused. What is all this? Michaels answered. Elliot wasn't acting alone. He's part of a network. A network of what? Emily asked, holding Noah tightly against her chest. The agent looked at them carefully. Espionage. Silence. Elliot's been under surveillance for months, the other agent explained. He's suspected of stealing sensitive tech data from various American companies. He uses personal relationships to gain access to homes, offices, devices, and installs surveillance bugs. Josh's stomach dropped. So this had nothing to do with Noah? Not directly, the agent said. But your home became an access point. Your baby's monitor was a backdoor into your internet network. From there, Elliot could access files, cloud drives, encrypted messages. But why us? Emily asked. We're not important. Michaels looked at Josh. You work in software design, right? Josh blinked. I work for a medical tech firm. I've been leading development on a biometric encryption platform. The agent nodded slowly. That's exactly what they were after. Emily gasped. So they weren't targeting Noah? They were using him as a cover. Max growled softly. Josh dropped into a chair, overwhelmed. He used our friendship, our baby, just to get close to the software. Emily looked down at Max, who now sat by the door, ears alert. He knew, all along. Michael smiled faintly. Maxwell always been more than just a dog. He was trained to detect stress chemicals, irregular behavior, even faint magnetic fields. He's built to sense danger, even before it happens. That night, the house went quiet again. But it wasn't peace. It was the heavy quiet before a storm. At 2:46 a.m., Max stood up suddenly. He padded to the window, sniffed, then growled deep and loud. Emily sat up in bed, startled. Max? Josh opened the nursery door and found Max standing in front of the crib, his hackles raised. The baby was fine, but Max wasn't looking at the baby. He was looking up, at the ceiling vent. Emily gasped. There's someone in the attic. Josh grabbed the phone. Michael's now! Someone's in the house! Max barked and jumped, scratching at the ceiling. Josh grabbed a bat and climbed to the attic hatch. Slowly, quietly, he pushed the panel open and peeked in, then froze. A shadow moved. Someone was there. Don't move! Josh yelled. But the figure dropped down and ran, through the hallway, past the nursery, and toward the back door. Max didn't hesitate. He bolted. Through the living room, down the hallway, out into the yard, and tackled the intruder just before he hit the fence. The man screamed as Max pinned him, barking fiercely, jaws snapping just inches from his neck. Police swarmed in moments later. Flashlights, handcuffs, orders shouted, chaos. But Max never let up until the man was restrained. It was Elliot. He had come back to finish what he started. Michael stood over him, breathing hard. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Elliot said nothing. But Max? He stood between the officers and the house, panting, blood on his snout, eyes still burning with instinct. Emily ran out, Noah in her arms, shaking. Josh met her halfway. He saved us again, she whispered, her voice breaking. No, Josh said softly. He saved our lives. Every single time. Inside, as dawn began to break, Max returned to the nursery and finally laid his head down beside the crib, still, silent, and, for the first time in days, at peace. The morning sun rose slowly over the quiet neighborhood, casting golden light over the front lawn, still marked by police boot prints and tire tracks. The chaos from the night before had settled into a strange calm, the kind that comes after surviving something you never thought would touch your life. Emily watched from the kitchen window, Noah asleep in her arms, while Josh stood beside her, holding a fresh cup of coffee neither of them would drink. They hadn't spoken much since the arrest. What was there to say? Elliot, a friend they had trusted, welcomed into their home, into their nursery, had been taken away in handcuffs after attempting to infiltrate their house for a final time. If it weren't for Max, they never would have known. If it weren't for Max, they might not be standing here. Max! He lay at the foot of the crib now, eyes closed, chest rising and falling in soft, peaceful breaths. His body was tired, older than before, but there was no mistaking the quiet alertness still tucked beneath his calm. The doorbell rang just before noon. When Josh opened it, Sergeant Michael stood there in full uniform, flanked by 2 other officers and a woman from the mayor's office. Behind them stood a black SUV with the K9 unit insignia on its door. "Can we come in?" Michaels asked with a warm smile. Josh nodded, stepping aside. Max slowly lifted his head and padded toward the living room. When he saw Michaels, his tail wagged just once, dignified, not excited. Michaels crouched down and ran a hand along Max's thick fur. "Hey, partner, you really outdid yourself this time." Emily and Josh stood together, unsure of what was about to happen. The woman from the mayor's office stepped forward. "On behalf of the city, we wanted to present something small, to honor what your dog did, not just as a protector, but as a guardian, for your child, and for this community." She reached into a case and pulled out a gleaming medal. It wasn't large or flashy, just a polished medallion with the city's crest engraved in the center. Around the edge, the words, "For unshakable loyalty and bravery." She bent down and gently clipped it to Max's collar. He stood still, noble, quiet, as if he knew what it meant. Michael stood, clearing his throat. "We've worked with a lot of canines over the years, and some of them, like Max, go beyond what they're trained to know. He didn't just detect threats. He understood them. He didn't just protect your son. He made sure this house never stopped being safe." Josh's eyes welled up. He couldn't speak. Emily wiped a tear. "We thought we were taking care of him, but the whole time he was taking care of us." Michael smiled softly. "That's how it always is with the best ones." After the officials left, the house felt different, still quiet, still healing, but lighter. Josh installed new cameras, a fresh security system, and a completely isolated baby monitor with military-grade encryption. Every precaution was taken, but deep down, they both knew. The real safety didn't come from tech. It came from Max. That evening, Emily sat on the floor beside Max in the nursery. Noah lay in the crib, cooing softly in his sleep. "You know he watches you, right?" she said softly. "When you're not looking? He already trusts you more than anything in the world." Max let out a soft groan and rested his chin on her knee. Josh walked in a moment later, holding something behind his back. "We thought maybe he deserved more than a medal." Emily looked up as Josh revealed a brand new, orthopedic dog bed. Soft, elevated, and surrounded by blankets. Max sniffed it once, then looked at the crib. He walked to the bed, sniffed again, then laid down, still positioned perfectly to see Noah through the bars. "I guess it'll take some time," Josh chuckled. "No rush," Emily whispered. "He'll rest when he knows we're safe." And that night, for the first time in weeks, Max slept deeply. Not because the danger was gone, but because for now, his family could finally breathe. 3 years later, the house was filled with laughter. Noah, now a toddler with messy blonde curls and a crooked smile, ran barefoot through the backyard, clutching a toy police badge. Behind him, slower but determined, came Max, his fur grayer, his steps heavier, but his eyes still sharp and full of purpose. "Come on, Max," Noah shouted, giggling. "You gotta protect me." Max barked once, playfully, then trotted after him, tail wagging. From the porch, Emily watched with a soft smile. Josh wrapped an arm around her shoulders, both of them silent, hearts full. They had moved on, yes, but they never forgot. The cameras were still up, the scars still existed, but so did Max, still standing guard, still watching. Noah fell to the grass, laughing. Max reached him, laid beside him, and rested his head across the boy's tiny legs, letting out a long sigh of peace. Emily took a photo of the moment, knowing what it meant. A hero. And the life he saved. Still together, still home.